Once upon a time, in a quiet neighborhood called Maple Grove, there lived a woman named Sarah. She was a kind and caring mother of a young boy named Max, who was 10 years old. Max was an energetic child, always playing with his friends or riding his bike. Sarah loved living in Maple Grove, with its friendly neighbors and lovely parks. However, there was one thing that troubled her: the Homeowners Association, or HOA. The HOA was known for its strict rules and their tendency to complain about anything that seemed out of line. Sarah had always followed the rules, but lately, they had been especially tough on her. One sunny afternoon, Sarah was in her kitchen preparing burgers for dinner when she heard a loud knock at the door. She frowned and wiped her hands on a towel. She wondered who it could be. She opened the door to find 3 stern-looking members of the HOA standing there. Their names were Mr. Parker, Mrs. Jensen, and Mr. Collins. They often made her feel uncomfortable with their constant reminders about the rules. "Hello, Sarah," Mr. Parker said, his voice firm. "We need to talk to you about your yard. It's not meeting the standards set by the HOA." Sarah looked at her yard and saw that a few weeds had poked through the flower beds. She was disappointed to hear this, but she knew she could fix it. "I'm sorry," she replied softly. "I'll take care of it this weekend." Mrs. Jensen crossed her arms and scowled. "This is not just a minor issue, Sarah. The HOA expects your yard to be maintained perfectly at all times. We might have to impose a fine if you don't get it under control." Sarah's heart raced. The thought of a fine worried her. She had a tight budget, and she couldn't afford unnecessary expenses. "Please, I promise I will fix it," she insisted, trying to sound convincing. Just then, Max came running down the hall, excited from playing outside. He had a big smile on his face but quickly faded when he saw the visitors at the door. "Mom, who are they?" "They are from the HOA, sweetie. They want to talk to us about the yard," Sarah explained, trying to keep her voice calm. As the conversation continued, things became tense. Mr. Collins raised his voice. "We don't have time for excuses, Sarah. We're serious about this. You need to comply." Max, sensing the anger in the air, stepped closer to his mother. Just then, the front door swung open, and a tall man stepped inside. He was dressed in a sharp suit, and his presence was strong. It was Sam, Max's bodyguard. Though only a child, Max had a bodyguard because of an incident a few months ago that had scared both Sarah and Maximum. They hired Sam for safety, but he had become a friendly presence in their lives. "Is everything all right here?" Sam asked, surveying the situation. His protective nature kicked in as he noticed the frowning HOA members. Mr. Parker hesitated, looking uncertain. "We were just discussing some issues with Sarah here." Sam's gaze shifted to the HOA members, and he took a step forward. "I think it's best if you leave her alone. She's doing her best to be a good neighbor." The 3 HOA members exchanged glances, feeling a bit intimidated by Sam's confident demeanor. "This is a private matter," Mrs. Jensen said, but her voice was less steady than before. "Undoubtedly," Sam replied, his voice calm yet firm. "But I do not think you should threaten her. This is not how we handle issues in our community." Sarah stood behind Sam, feeling a mix of gratitude and surprise. Although she appreciated the support, she had never expected her son to have such a strong protector. Mr. Collins scoffed. "You think you can just intimidate us by showing up? We know our rights." Sam's eyes narrowed a little. "Intimidation is not the way to resolve conflicts. Understanding is. I suggest you leave her property and think carefully about how you approach these discussions in the future." The HOA members looked taken aback. They were not used to being confronted like this. After a brief pause, they mumbled their excuses and walked away, all while shooting glances back at Sam and Sarah. Once they were gone, Sarah took a deep breath and smiled at Sam. "Thank you. I didn't think they would be so hard on me. You really helped." Max looked up at Sam, his eyes wide with admiration. "Wow, you're like a superhero, Sam." Sam chuckled slightly. "Just doing my job, Maximum. Your mom deserves to feel safe in her own home without being intimidated." Sarah knelt down to Max's height and hugged him tightly. "You did great, sweetheart. I'm lucky to have you both." As the day went on, Sarah and Max prepared for dinner together. Sarah couldn't shake off the worry about the HOA, but she was also reminded how important it was to have support. She realized that having Sam around gave her the strength to deal with difficult situations. Later that week, Sarah decided to take control of her yard. She spent the weekend clearing the weeds, planting new flowers, and making her garden the most beautiful on the block. With every hoe of soil and every seed planted, she felt more empowered. A few days later, she received a note from the HOA, notifying her that they recognized her effort and would not impose any fines. She felt a wave of relief wash over her. With Sam's protection and Max's support, she knew she could face anything that came her way. One evening, as Sarah and Max sat on their porch enjoying homemade lemonade, she looked at her son and said, "You know, Max, you taught me that it's important to stand up for ourselves. Sometimes things can get tough, but with the right people by your side, you can make it through." Max smiled bright and proud. "And we can do it together, Mom." Sarah nodded, grateful for her little family and the courage they shared. As they sat together enjoying the sunset, Sarah realized that even small moments could turn challenging experiences into something powerful. In the end, they had weathered the storm together, proving that love and support could conquer fear. From that day forward, both Sarah and Max were a little braver, knowing they had each other and Sam by their side. Maple Grove would always be home, and the HOA would have to think twice before coming back to intimidate them again. Once upon a time in a quiet suburb, there lived a woman named Linda. She was a single mother, raising her 11-year-old son, Tommy. Linda had always wanted a peaceful life, filled with laughter and love. However, her life took an unexpected turn when she became involved with the local homeowners association, or HOA. The HOA was a group of residents who aimed to keep the neighborhood neat and tidy. They had strict rules about everything from lawn care to house color and, while many appreciated their efforts, others began to feel the weight of their control. Linda was one of the latter. She had recently painted her front door a bright blue, a color she loved. However, this decision did not sit well with the HOA. One autumn afternoon, Linda received a letter from the HOA. It stated she needed to repaint her door to match the community's beige palette. Linda frowned as she read the letter. "Who are they to tell me what color I can use on my own door?" she grumbled. Determined not to give in easily, she decided to ignore their demands. Days passed, and Linda received more letters filled with warnings. Before she knew it, she found herself entangled in a battle against the HOA. She started to feel anxious, concerned about the possibility of confrontation. Then one afternoon, she heard a knock at her door. She peeked through the peephole and saw 3 stern-looking members of the HOA standing there. Her heart raced, and she thought about running or hiding, but she didn't want to appear weak. Just as she gathered her courage to open the door, she remembered something important. Tommy, her son, had recently made a friend named Mike. Mike was not just any friend. He came from a wealthy family, and his parents had hired a bodyguard named Victor to keep him safe. Victor was a tall man with broad shoulders and a friendly smile. Linda liked him. He was respectful and always treated Tommy well. Suddenly, Linda had an idea. She called Tommy over and explained the situation. "Tommy, can you ask Mike if Victor can help us?" she asked, hoping to have some backup. Tommy nodded, and after a quick conversation on his phone, he agreed. Before long, a knock echoed in the house. This time, it was Victor. He had arrived within minutes, sensing the urgency in Tommy's voice. Linda opened the door and welcomed him in. She explained the situation about the HOA and how intimidating they were. Victor listened carefully, his expression serious but calm. "Don't worry, Linda. I'll be here for support," he said. Victor's confident words gave her strength. Linda, accompanied by Victor, opened the door to the HOA members. The 3 HOA representatives stood with their arms crossed, looking disapproving. The leader of the group, Mrs. Harmon, stepped forward, her eyes narrowing at the sight of the bodyguard. "Is this necessary?" she asked, her voice sharp. "We simply want to discuss the issue of your door color." "I'm here to support Linda," Victor replied calmly. "What seems to be the issue?" Mrs. Harmon shifted uncomfortably. We have rules in this community, and rules are meant to keep people safe and bring harmony, Victor interrupted smoothly. But they should never be used to bully or intimidate. Linda felt a surge of courage. I painted my door blue because it makes me happy. Isn't that the point of living in a community? To be able to express ourselves. The other HOA members murmured to each other, surprised by her boldness. Linda continued, I understand there are rules, but creativity and individuality should also have a place here. Mrs. Harmon glanced at her fellow HOA members, who seemed taken aback by Victor's presence and Linda's words. This is not how things are supposed to go, she finally said, her tone losing its edge. However, perhaps we can talk about a compromise. Victor smiled, sensing a shift in mood. Compromise sounds great. What do you have in mind? After a lengthy discussion, they agreed that Linda could keep her blue door as long as she agreed to plant some flowers in her front yard to match the neighborhood's aesthetics. It was a fair deal, and Linda felt relieved. As the HOA members left, she turned to Victor, her heart still racing with excitement. Thank you. I couldn't have done this without you. It was your courage that made the difference, he replied with a kind smile. Standing up for what you want is always worth it. Tommy rushed over, hugging his mother tightly. You did it, Mom. You stood up to them. He cheered, his eyes sparkling with pride. Later, Linda and Tommy worked together in the yard, planting bright flowers around the blue door. As they dug into the soil and laughed, she realized that this tough experience had brought them closer. They planted daisies, sunflowers, and marigolds, filling their yard with color and joy. While they were busy, Linda thought about the importance of standing up not only for herself but also for the message she wanted to share with Tommy. It's okay to be different and to express oneself. The HOA was just an obstacle, but they had found a way to move past it together. The days went by, and Linda felt proud every time she looked at her blue door surrounded by the vibrant flowers. The HOA eventually accepted it, realizing that the community was stronger when its members felt free to express themselves. Through her struggle, Linda learned valuable lessons about courage, teamwork, and the significance of being true to herself. And with a supportive son and a friendly bodyguard like Victor by her side, she knew she could face anything life threw her way. From that day on, every time someone knocked at her door, Linda welcomed them with a smile, feeling more empowered and hopeful than ever before. And her home, with its blue door and colorful garden, stood as a symbol of her determination and love. Asterisk protagonist. Me, a single parent, named Max. Asterisk supporting character. My son, named Kevin. Asterisk supporting character. Bodyguard, named Zeus. Asterisk antagonist. HOA president, named Karen. Asterisk antagonist. HOA member, named Brad. Original. Type. Story. The doorbell rang, its shrill sound cutting through the otherwise quiet afternoon. I was in the middle of helping my son, Kevin, with his homework, a task that required more patience than I often possessed. I'll get it, I sighed, pushing back my chair. Kevin, all of 8 years old, was a bright kid, but sometimes his focus wandered, especially when fractions were involved. But Dad, he whined, we're almost done. Just a quick interruption. Buddy. Be right back. I headed towards the door, expecting a delivery or perhaps a neighbor needing a cup of sugar. What I didn't expect was the stern-faced duo standing on my porch, radiating an aura of disapproval. It was Karen, the HOA president, and Brad, her ever-present sidekick. I'd had my run-ins with them before, mostly about minor infractions. My lawn being half an inch too long, the color of my mailbox being a shade off from the approved list. Petty stuff. Really. Good afternoon, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. What can I do for you? Karen, a woman who seemed to have perfected the art of the withering glare, stepped forward. Mr. Williams, she began, her voice dripping with condescension. We've received several complaints regarding unauthorized construction on your property. I frowned. Unauthorized construction? I haven't done any construction. Unless you count the birdhouse Kevin and I built last weekend. Brad, a man whose primary function seemed to be nodding in agreement with everything Karen said, chimed in. We're referring to the structure in your backyard. My confusion deepened. Structure. What structure? Karen's lips tightened. We'd like to see it for ourselves. I hesitated. I really didn't want them snooping around my property, but I also knew that refusing would only escalate the situation. Fine, I said, stepping aside. But I assure you, there's nothing to see. As they marched past me, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was about more than just a supposed unauthorized structure. Karen had been looking for a reason to come after me ever since I'd challenged her proposal to ban all basketball hoops in the neighborhood. She claimed they were an eyesore. I argued they were essential for childhood development. We walked through the house, Kevin peeking out from behind the kitchen island, his eyes wide with curiosity. I gave him a reassuring smile and a quick shake of my head. As we stepped into the backyard, I braced myself for Karen's reaction. What she would see, what they both would see, was not a structure, but a highly trained, 6'5" wall of muscle named Zeus. Zeus wasn't exactly new to the household, but he was new to the neighborhood. He was Kevin's bodyguard, a necessity that had become a reality after a series of unsettling events. A stalker incident at Kevin's school, a threatening letter left in our mailbox. I wasn't taking any chances with my son's safety. Zeus, a former Special Forces operative, took his job very seriously. He was always vigilant, always observant, always ready to protect. And right now, he was standing beside the newly installed swing set, watching Karen and Brad approach with an expression that could curdle milk. Karen stopped dead in her tracks, her mouth agape. Brad, never one to think for himself, simply mirrored her stunned expression. Who is this? Karen stammered, pointing a shaky finger at Zeus. I stepped forward, trying to maintain a semblance of calm. This is Zeus. A friend of the family. Karen's eyes narrowed. A friend? With that kind of build? Don't insult my intelligence, Mr. Williams. Is this some kind of intimidation tactic? I sighed. No, Karen. He's here to ensure my son's safety. Safety? From what? This is a perfectly safe neighborhood, she exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. Is it? I countered, my own voice hardening. Because I seem to recall a few incidents recently that suggest otherwise. And as a single parent, I have to take every precaution to protect my child. Zeus remained silent, his gaze unwavering, his presence a silent declaration of his purpose. Brad, finally finding his voice, piped up. But he's scaring the neighbors. We can't have someone like that walking around, making people feel unsafe. He's not walking around, I retorted. He's right here, in my backyard, protecting my son. And if anyone should feel unsafe, it's anyone who intends to harm him. Karen, recovering from her initial shock, regained her composure. This is unacceptable, Mr. Williams. We'll have to discuss this at the next HOA meeting. We may need to revise our security policies. Fine, I said, my patience wearing thin. Discuss away. But Zeus stays. With a final glare, Karen turned on her heel, Brad scurrying behind her. As they disappeared around the side of the house, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Kevin ran up to me, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Dad, that was awesome. Zeus is like a superhero. I chuckled, ruffling his hair. He kind of is. Buddy. He kind of is. Zeus finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. Are you all right, sir? And young Master Kevin? We're fine, Zeus. Thanks to you. It is my duty, sir. I knew this wasn't the end of it. Karen wouldn't let this go. She would rally the other HOA members, twist the narrative, and try to find a way to get rid of Zeus. But I was ready for her. I was ready to fight for my son's safety, even if it meant taking on the entire HOA. That night, after Kevin was asleep, I sat down at my computer and started researching HOA regulations, security policies, and my rights as a homeowner. I knew I needed to be prepared for whatever Karen threw my way. The next few days were filled with whispered conversations among the neighbors, sideways glances, and a general sense of unease. I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken judgment. But I refused to back down. Then, the official notice arrived, a letter summoning me to a special HOA meeting to discuss security concerns and potential violations of neighborhood regulations. I knew this was it. This was their attempt to force me to choose between my son's safety and conforming to their narrow-minded rules. But they were underestimating a father's love and a bodyguard's unwavering loyalty. The night of the meeting arrived, and as I walked into the community hall, I could feel the weight of dozens of pairs of eyes on me. Karen sat at the head of the table, a smug look on her face. Brad was, as usual, right beside her. "Mr. Williams," Karen began, her voice amplified by the microphone. "We've called this meeting to address the concerns raised by your associate, Mr. Zeus." I remained silent, letting her set the stage. Several residents have expressed feeling intimidated and unsafe due to his presence. We believe he poses a threat to the peaceful enjoyment of our community. I finally spoke, my voice calm but firm. Zeus is not a threat. He is here to protect my son. And I will not apologize for prioritizing my child's safety. Genre: original. Type: characters. Michael, a stern and imposing bodyguard, fiercely protective of his charge. Ethan, a bright and inquisitive young boy, unknowingly at the center of the conflict. Mr. Harrison, the officious and overbearing HOA president. Mrs. Davison, a nosy and judgmental HOA member. The doorbell rang, its chime cutting through the quiet afternoon. Ethan, all of 7 years old, was engrossed in building a magnificent Lego castle, his tongue peeking out from the corner of his mouth in concentration. He barely registered the sound. Michael, however, was instantly alert. He moved with a quiet efficiency that belied his large frame, his eyes scanning the security monitors before he even considered approaching the door. Michael wasn't family, he was Ethan's bodyguard, a constant presence in the boy's life since a series of unsettling events had shaken their world. He reached the door and peered through the peephole. 2 figures stood on the porch, a man in a crisp polo shirt and khaki pants, radiating an air of self-importance, and a woman with a tightly wound bun and a perpetually disapproving expression. Homeowners Association, Michael surmised instantly. Trouble. He opened the door. "Good afternoon," Michael said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in the air. He was a large man, built like a linebacker, and his presence filled the doorway. He didn't smile. The man, Mr. Harrison, puffed out his chest. "Yes, good afternoon. I'm Mr. Harrison, president of the Homeowners Association, and this is Mrs. Davison, a valued member of our committee. We're here to discuss a matter of concern." Mrs. Davison peered around Michael, her eyes darting towards the interior of the house. "We've received reports," she said, her voice laced with suspicion, "about certain activities taking place on this property." Michael remained impassive. "Activities?" "Yes, activities," Mr. Harrison repeated, clearly annoyed by Michael's lack of deference. "Unapproved modifications to the landscaping, excessive noise at unreasonable hours, and the general impression that this property is not being maintained to the standards of our community." Michael raised an eyebrow. "I assure you, everything is in order." "Well, we'll be the judge of that," Mrs. Davison snapped. "We'd like to conduct an inspection." Michael paused for a moment, his gaze unwavering. "I'm afraid that won't be possible." Mr. Harrison's face flushed red. "Are you refusing us entry? Do you know who we are?" "I know exactly who you are," Michael said, his voice hardening. "And I'm telling you, now is not a good time." Inside, Ethan had finally abandoned his Lego castle and wandered towards the hallway, drawn by the raised voices. He peeked around the corner, his eyes wide with curiosity. He recognized Mr. Harrison. The man always seemed to be scowling whenever Ethan rode his bike on the sidewalk. "Look here," Mr. Harrison said, his voice rising. "We have every right to inspect this property. We've received numerous complaints. We suspect you're in violation of several HOA regulations." "And what regulations might those be?" Michael asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Well, for starters," Mrs. Davison chimed in, "the basketball hoop. It's not an approved color, and it's clearly visible from the street. And the inflatable dinosaur in the backyard. Completely inappropriate. Michael fought back a sigh. He knew about the basketball hoop. Ethan loved playing, and the bright orange color brought a smile to his face. As for the inflatable dinosaur, well, what was a backyard without a little bit of whimsy? I understand your concerns, Michael said, trying to keep his voice even. But I assure you, everything is being taken care of. That's not good enough, Mr. Harrison said, taking a step forward. We need to see for ourselves. We need to ensure that this property is in compliance with HOA standards. He reached out to push past Michael, and that was his mistake. In a movement that was almost too fast to see, Michael blocked his path, his hand closing on Mr. Harrison's wrist with surprising strength. I wouldn't do that, Michael said, his voice a low growl. Mr. Harrison recoiled, his face now a mask of outrage. Are you threatening me? Are you assaulting me? I'm preventing you from trespassing, Michael said, his grip tightening slightly. And I'm advising you to leave. Mrs. Davison gasped, clutching her chest. This is outrageous. We'll call the police. We'll sue. You're welcome to do whatever you feel is necessary, Michael said, his expression unchanging. But I suggest you do it from somewhere else. Ethan, witnessing the scene from the hallway, felt a surge of protectiveness towards Michael. He knew that Michael was always there for him, always watching out for him. He didn't understand exactly what was happening, but he knew that these people were upsetting Michael, and that made him angry. He stepped forward, his small voice cutting through the tension. Leave him alone, he said, his chin held high. He's my friend. Mr. Harrison and Mrs. Davison stared at Ethan, momentarily taken aback. And who is this? Mr. Harrison asked, his voice softening slightly. I'm Ethan, he said. And this is my house. And I don't want you here. Michael looked down at Ethan, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. He was fiercely protective of the boy, not just because it was his job, but because he genuinely cared about him. He saw in Ethan a spark of intelligence and kindness that deserved to be nurtured, and he would do anything to shield him from the ugliness of the world. Ethan, Michael said, why don't you go back to your Legos? I'll handle this. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then nodded and retreated back into the house. Michael turned back to Mr. Harrison and Mrs. Davison, his expression hardening once more. You've seen the boy, he said. Now, I suggest you leave. Before I lose my patience. Mr. Harrison, sensing that he was outmatched, finally backed down. Fine, he said, his voice tight with anger. But this isn't over. We'll be back. And next time, we'll have the authorities with us. I look forward to it, Michael said, his voice flat. Mr. Harrison and Mrs. Davison turned and stomped back towards their car, muttering under their breaths. Michael watched them go, his eyes narrowed. He knew that this was just the beginning. He closed the door and leaned against it for a moment, taking a deep breath. He hated these kinds of confrontations, but he would do whatever it took to protect Ethan. He was more than just a bodyguard. He was a guardian, a protector, a friend. He turned and walked back towards the living room, where Ethan was once again engrossed in his Lego castle. He knew that he couldn't tell Ethan everything, but he also knew that he couldn't hide the truth from him completely. He would have to find a way to explain what was happening, to prepare Ethan for what was to come, without scaring him. It was a delicate balance, but he was determined to strike it. He sat down next to Ethan, watching him work. The boy's brow was furrowed in concentration, his fingers moving deftly as he added another brick to the towering structure.